So in today's episode of The Journey, I'm going to be speaking to two amazing Black women who have done such great things. Both of them have achieved their PhDs. One of them is an international speaker, a researcher, a lecturer, and she's run multiple marathons. My other guest has made history, being one of the sole founders and Black women founders to have ever raised over $1 million at pre-seed. We're going to be listening to their journeys and taking all the tips and lessons that they've learned along the way. Remember to subscribe and share and like it and do all that fun stuff. And let's get into it. Thank you guys for joining the show. So I'm calling the show The Journey because I think it's really important to learn from successful and inspirational people such as yourselves, learning from the journeys, learning from what you've learned and how other people can apply that into their lives as well. Probably kick off with you, Amber. How did you actually go from having the initial idea and saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do to create it? And then I guess the second question beneath that is, how did you take it up to that next level and make history? Was it accidental or were you like, yeah, I'm going to make history?
Okay, let's unpack it a little bit. So the initial idea, I think always tends to come from experience, whether it's a bad experience or a frustrating experience or a learning experience or whatever. And I think for me, it was a combination of all those things. I was running a nonprofit that I did in a completely organic way, wasn't thinking about being an entrepreneur, just knew that we had to be an entity to make it work. And the concept of financing and things, or being an entrepreneur, I would say, even wasn't about that. So in one sense, it was a complete and utter flop or failure as a business, although it wasn't. Not when you look at what we were doing. But then on the other hand, it was really enriching and gave me lots of experience, lots of clients, lots of contacts, all of that. So learning from that, I think what I would have done differently in that scenario is charged for my time and worked on more adamantly at developing a sustainable business model. From there, bits of frustrating experiences in clinical trials with administration, data capture and collection, and with patient-public health engagement. That idea that I had was to streamline those processes so that they could be more efficient. And so I went from that idea to then really knowing and understanding that I need financing for this idea, it needs to be scalable in different ways. I need to understand my market. So I had a different structure, I think, starting off the back of what was very much an organic sort of project that was also a nonprofit and like a nice sort of package space to something that was more structured. And then I put myself into environments that could facilitate my growth. So in the first instance, I set aside some time in the Royal Academy of Engineering enterprise fellowship to learn how to become an entrepreneur, break down some of the predefined limitations I had for myself and my mindset, and to test and validate the idea across different industries. And then after that, I put myself into an environment which was Entrepreneur First, an accelerator to find working partners, ideate, and to learn how to get investment, really. So I think I've gone through a journey, but I put myself into environments that could facilitate my growth. And that's pretty much the path that I took from ideation or understanding what I needed and putting myself in spaces that could facilitate that growth.
I think because we're such in a culture where everyone's celebrating the wins, I've raised this, I've raised that, people are very focused on the money. But the thing that's really been coming out from what you've been saying is that you put yourself in environments where you needed to facilitate growth. You needed to learn something new or find a way to leverage either new information or what you had already. So that's a key thing. And I think that's something that people should rather focus on rather than the big ticket numbers and stuff. Yes, you've done a lot of great things and you've made history, but at the core of it was a willingness to grow.
Yeah, but also at the end of the day, it's you. I have bid for what I needed to get my business to a place where I could grow to the next level. So it almost doesn't mean anything in a way, because it is, I can see the end of the roadway very clearly. Once you get into your sort of financial planning and things, you may have raised over $1 million or however much, but it's there for a very specific reason. So for me, it's not time to celebrate yet, because I'm still in the phase of proving the business model and proving that everything can work. So yeah, I don't get too hung up on like the PR or that side of it. While it can be important for representation and maybe responsible in some way, it's not the end all and say all. And a lot of times it can take away a lot of your time, so.
Exactly. When you realized the scale of what you wanted to do with your idea and what required, did that put you off, or were you hesitant at first, or were you just completely like determined to make it happen?
No, I think I'm a determined person, but I don't think it came out that way. I think it came out in phases of challenging myself, in the sense challenging my mindset. So the idea of your most ambitious goal, a lot of times people, they have this concept. A lot of times you will say something like, "Oh, I want to achieve this thing, or I can only achieve this amount of the big thing that I want to," without considering the fact that you're going to put in the exact same amount of effort for this little thing here as you would for this thing here. So I think incrementally, I kept challenging or questioning myself as to why would I only go to a £6 billion market? Like, why would I, and it just evolved from there to the point where it was a large enough market with verticals within it, but also achievable with the plan that I had. And so I just think, and I think that happens every time, like as I grow and hit the next milestone, now we're beyond the multi-billion-dollar companies, and now we have trillion-dollar companies. So it's just sort of pushing your mentality of why not, and designing that plan to make it there. Setting the goal and just making the plan.
Yeah.
You go.
Yeah, that's great. And so moving on to Leanne right now. So obviously, as I mentioned, you've got your PhD, which we'll talk about a bit later, because you did something crazy while you're doing your PhD. But one of the main things that you've done that's quite notable is actually done a few things. Let's start with the marathons, right? Because that's just, I remember when you told me you did that and I was just like, like, you're one of them. But what goes through your head when you're like, I'm gonna just keep running for hours and hours and hours? Like, how? Explain it.
I think that's what goes through your head. Keep running. And I was thinking, okay, I think that was that in the October or November, I think. And I was thinking, right, okay, I've got until April basically to train. During the training, it was just a case. I don't even think I really captured what 26.2 miles looks like, and what it looks like. I don't think I really ever thought about it. This is how far I'm actually going to have to run. I think I just kept going like, okay, so today I'm going to do 1 mile. Tomorrow it's going to be like 2, 3, 4, 5, and I think I kept focusing on the training miles as opposed to like, oh, I've got 26.2 to do. What was the hardest? I remember my hardest training day was when I think I did my 22 miles in my training runs. I don't know why, but I just went out. I was in like just a t-shirt and like running leggings or whatever, and I just had hit the park. And I think I had another like 10 miles to go or something, and it started pouring with rain. And I was at that point where I could just run home and do it tomorrow, but I was too far. And I thought, okay, what's if I stay out in this rain, the thing that's going to happen, okay, maybe I'll get a cold or something, but like, okay, let me just keep going. So I was running. And all this time it's raining. I'm thinking, Leanne, is this worth it? Why are you even doing this? Why are you even doing this? So then I literally like still running. I ran past my house, ran up my stairs. One of my housemates at the time, she was in and she was probably thinking, Leanne, what are you doing? It's raining. But I had to run in because I was cold at that time as well now. So I had to, I'm still jogging, by the way. So I'm still like going. I haven't stopped. Just got a hoodie and then ran back out the door and then finished. But I think even though it was still quite far because I'd reached my 22-mile training point, so I'd done quite a lot of miles. I think at that point, that was where I sort of reached that, okay, the marathon is going to be, you're going to run 4 more miles. And at that point, I felt sort of a bit at breaking point. So I think that was my hardest training run. And I think I'm so thankful that that all happened because it meant that I was actually, like, I think I overcame a lot of things mentally just in that, obviously over time, but in that one day as well.
You've essentially unpacked so many different lessons and that are applicable in a business sense or a personal development, right? So i.e. there was a mountain in front of you, something you had never done, but you kind of broke it down into steps, right? Because nobody climbs a mountain in one leap. Like, it's actually a consecutive set of steps. Another thing you mentioned was, I guess, that rain story. You always have that chance to turn back, or you always have that chance to be like, I'll just take 5 minutes to rest, or there's always going to be that reason why you can push it till tomorrow. But that's where the disease of procrastination starts. And it's just so important to, especially when the condition actually looks like it doesn't match it, that's actually the best time to push yourself even more, because then it's ingrained in your head that nothing's going to be harder than this as well. So I think that's really why I wanted to get to the mental game behind running a marathon. In terms of like public speaking as well, which is another big thing that shakes people off. And Amber, I know you did a pitch as well to quite a few people. What's the mental game behind public speaking? What lessons did you learn when you had to push yourself to that level?
Well, for me, public speaking, I still kind of dislike public speaking, if I'm honest. For me, I think over time, there's a layer of preparation, mental preparation, even beyond whatever you're going to say. One narrative that I have for myself is that there's more people that want to see you win than there are that don't want to see you win. And so I think sometimes we can just focus into ourselves on the negative rather than thinking about so many people that are, pulling for you even beyond yourself and thinking about the positive.
I think a lot of things generally are mental. Once you overcome that the mental side of it, like even now, sometimes I won't say, I can just go and speak anywhere. Like I still get a bit nervous, but I think part of it is preparation, knowing your stuff. If you know what you're going there to say and you know what you're talking about, then you should have confidence in that.
There's so many different elements that form part of people's journeys, right? And we can't obviously cover all of them. I think like determination would be a really, really good thing to discuss. So I'll probably start with Leanne right now. What is determination to you, like professionally and personally? Like, how do you actually go about measuring it in your life?
Yeah, no, I think determination, when I think of determination, I just think of, just the pursuit of always moving forwards and having a focus on where you're going, or at least bringing together a focus on where you're going, because you don't always necessarily know initially, isn't it?
It's funny that your son's actually making noise right now, because you got your PhD while you were pregnant, right? Like,
I handed in my
respect
on my due date.
Woo.
Amber, what do you think of that? Like, do you agree with her? Do you take it from like a different angle?
Yeah, I agree with everything she said. For me, determination for me kind of brings up lots of words, particularly resilience, courage, and consistency. Also, I think about it in a sense of a decision. So I kind of try and live my life by what may be called an actions train. So if you have 3 carts in the train, and you have decide, action, feeling. So decision is in your first cart, your action is in the second cart, and feelings are in the third cart. I think most people tend to lead their life by the feelings. So the train can go either way. And so if you lead your life by feelings, then your actions will follow that, and then your decisions follow that emotion. Rather, if you lead your life by the decision to pursue whatever it is that you are wanting to achieve, then your actions follow that, and then the feeling of being happy that you achieved it or whatever follows that. So I guess in a way you just decide. I've got that tattooed on me. So it's an actual motto for my life. Just decide.
Obviously, I want a lot of people to gain from this and not just kind of like hear a conversation, but get practical tips that they can start working on today, right? So your career, Leanne, obviously, like I said, you've spoken like globally, you've done stuff for Team GB, you've made like great personal goals, run marathons, been pregnant, done PhD, like your life is just full of achievements, right? What can someone actually start doing from today to allow them to kind of get onto your track, or like build the same traction that you had?
I think one thing I would say is that acknowledge your failures. I've never been, I've never really been one to sort of hide them. Never been one to really sort of hide them. I think that you hear all the time like, oh, if you fail 100 times, you get back up 101 and stuff like that. And in all honesty, it's just the truth, because if something didn't go to plan, then if you just sort of brush it off and say, oh, well, it didn't go to plan, so that will start something else, and you don't actually look back and think, okay, why didn't that go to plan? Have to be massive failures. Some of them are literally maybe like your timing was a little bit off. So that's one thing I'd say. Acknowledge your failures.
I agree with that. I also think not to be afraid of the word no, and asking any question. So one of the things I learned quite randomly and an experience throughout my journey is just to ask people for anything. Literally, like the worst that can happen is that they tell you no. And so I think so many people are stifled by the fear of those two letters when they are actually meaningless, or they actually mean something entirely different. So no doesn't always mean no in some contexts, or throughout professional life, it can mean maybe I can't afford that, or this or that. So it's I would say just be afraid of that. Everybody starts off somewhere, and you are not that different from most people.
Great. Thank you guys. This has been really insightful, and conversation done.